All right, so welcome to the gardeners who are here. If you are new to us, then you don't know about how we're asking you to participate, which is to turn your microphone off and keep your camera off. If your camera's off, we won't see anything. If we did see anything, we'd see your name. So nobody will know you're slurping coffee or whatever it is that you might be doing. But do make sure that your microphone it's got a slash through it. You just click it to get a slash through it. Because too many of us talking at once is chaos, is madness. And then there's a raise your hand control if you don't want to put your questions into chat. The chat is down on your menu bar someplace, and if you open it up, make sure that you've got it rotated. This little, oh, I forgot to make my pointer bigger. Make sure you keep that little critter, that little box that says meeting group chat. Make sure it stays on meeting group chat, because if it goes to Janet, or it goes to Stephen, we don't see those without looking for them particularly specially. We might get a little message that says that there's a message just for us, but it means we have to toggle back and forth, and we're not very good at doing that. Okay, system settings. Where is my pointer? Control center, accessibility. There you are. I have to click around over here and get this pointer made bigger, and nobody will be able to tell what we're pointing at. Hi, Stephen. You made
Hello.
it. You made it. Stephen and I are getting ready to leave town. We're on our heading to the Upper Peninsula with our 4 grandkids. And so Stephen's been busy today.
Stephen, since he's been 3 years old, gets geeked unbelievable when he goes up north.
Yes, it is God's country for Steve, that's for sure. So back to helping you figure out what's up. If you don't want to chat, then either in your reactions menu, which is on the menu bar, there's a raise hand, or it may be at the bottom of your participants menu. But if you want to talk, raise your hand. You'll pop to the top of the list. Steve will see you, and when he lines up, he's lining up questions from chat. So when we take a break from things we already have prepared, we can talk about your questions. If you want to talk, he can say, okay, you're first in line, and then you will click your microphone back on, and we can talk. We love to hear other people talk. It's very nice to do. So go ahead. If there are any questions right now, I've got a couple that came in during the week that might not get covered elsewhere that I can tell you about, but maybe there's something burning right now for these first 4 minutes. I don't see anything coming in the chat. So I'll tell you that we did get a glowing report from Nancy and David about their Ito peonies and how much they like them. It says Copper Kettle getting ready to open, and Cora Louise. And they have a third one. He said, we just love them. They're wonderful. They're blooming really well this year. But this one, which is Pastel Lilas, it's different than the others. It has multiple flowers. The stems are multi-flowered, whereas on the others, they're single flowered. And is that normal? Is that okay? Well, these peonies, these Ito peonies, named for one of the main breeders of them, he wasn't the only breeder, but there were a couple of people who nearly the same time in the world, one in Russia, I think, one in North Dakota, one in Japan, all figured out finally how to cross the tree peony and the herbaceous peony. And so all of these plants, these Ito peonies, and they got named Itos because he bred a lot of them. There are others. Some of them got some genes that were from the tree peonies perspective. The tree peonies genes are pretty much single flowered, but the herbaceous peonies are multi-flowered, and some of them just got the genes from the parent for multiple flowers, and that makes it a little heavier on the stem, but makes it very pretty. So nothing wrong with that. Elizabeth sent a picture of her tulips that she had said, well, they bloomed great, and then they didn't bloom, and they aren't blooming now. And we a few weeks ago said, we probably have a large, tall, late blooming hybrid, which are not reliably perennial for us. We just don't have the right conditions. We don't sit warm and dry enough in the soil through the summertime for them to rest and build the embryonic bulb and flower inside the bulb. Instead, what they do is they react to moisture in our soil. It's moist in the Midwest in the summer, even if it seems to you it's not. It's much moister than it is in Afghanistan, in the mountains, and in the old Persian Empire. So they split up and they become smaller bulbs. And these smaller bulbs are not small enough to carry a flower yet. Some of these bigger ones might be just barely big enough to carry a flower, but they're not as big as when they were put in. So if your tulips stopped blooming and they were late season, tall, flowered hybrids, don't expect them to live very long in your garden. They'll live, but bloom very long in your garden. You might want to treat them as an annual, which is what most of our clients do. We get lots of messages from people about plants they have. Susan right now has a lot of perennial big root geranium that she is more than willing to give away. Denise has these clay pots, big monstrous clay pots, and she says, I gotta throw them out because I'm not using them anymore. If somebody has a need for something in particular, you might want to send us an email, because chances are that somebody has just offered something and we can put you in touch. We don't want to do that as a full-time job, but we know that sometimes it's just such a shame to get rid of things that cost you money to begin with. We told Denise in the case of the pots that no, we didn't need them, that we've been switching to lighter things. The longer we garden, the more we want to make the weight as light as possible if we're going to get around. Without more ado, let's get this show on the road.
Hello and welcome to Free4All Friday. This is our 9th edition.
Yes, of letting everybody come. Well, you're all welcome. Tell people about it. We'd love to talk to more people. I mean, more people like talking to each other. We're celebrating, growing, and cultivating problem solving. And this is all coming from gardenatozz.org. I'm Janet McConovich.
And I'm Stephen Nicola.
And we are just Janet and solo Steve for tonight because
I didn't change my name yet.
Okay, we are more often together when we're doing presentations, but it's easier for us this way for me to run the pictures that we're showing and Steve runs the chat. So if you've got a question and you'd like to ask a question as we go along anytime, you can type it into chat, or in your menu down below, you can find the raise your hand control, raise your hand. Steve will keep track of that and make sure that we answer the questions that we that come in, because we want to hear from you. We want to hear what's going on in your garden. We know kind of what's going on in our garden, and we need more summer pictures of us, Steve. I keep finding all these pictures. They all have heavy.
Well, we'll ask our grandkids and
take some pictures.
Yep.
That would be good. That would be very good. We've been writing for 30 some years. We've gardened professionally for 40 years before we retired a couple of years ago. And we started the website gardenatozz.org so that we'd have a place to put what we'd written in one place and not have to write it again. So we could keep on going, because people keep giving us new questions, things that we haven't heard before, and we want to write those. So they're all there. It is a pretty dense site. There's lots of stuff in there because we have all of our magazine stuff. Well, not all of it, but a lot of our magazine stuff, a lot of our newspaper stuff, a lot of the things we wrote just for the website. They're all up there. And it does take a little looking to find them sometimes, but it's there for you to do. There's no cookies, there's no advertisers, there's nobody supporting it except us and you, if you are a subscriber to our webinars, because that subscription service helps us pay for the cost of the website and the new camera that we need once in a while and that kind of thing. We started Free4All Fridays a couple months ago because we said, we're not writing a newsletter anymore. We haven't for quite a while. I just can't seem to fit it in with putting the webinars together. But we do want to talk to people and find out what's going on in other gardens. We said, well, we'll just do it Friday nights, except for the night before a webinar. What's up, Steve?
Bonnie, what is with snails this year?
What is it with snails this year? What is it?
I guess it depends on where you're at.
Yeah, what is it with snails? What is it with earwigs? Some years the conditions are right for a plethora of insects, more of them to live through the winter.
It's just
more
eggs. Dry, and we're finding them on second floor windows, and I just pulled them off the dogwood.
Dry now doesn't matter. What mattered was during breeding season, which was back in April, and it was wet in April. So a lot of them are out, a lot of them are alive. All they got to do is get themselves under the shade of a leaf, and they can stay out of the sun. So some years we have a lot of them, and fortunately,
I face completely south with not a tree of shade, but our grubs, not grubs, but slugs and snails of the same family.
They're in the same order in the world, but they are not.
So would slug pellets keep snails away?
Probably. They won't keep them away. What slug pellets do is they entice the slug or the snail to eat them. And then they might kill them. And it's a might. I have read quite a bit about slugs recovering from eating that stuff. Some of them die, some of them don't. And that's what happens with pesticides that we use as they become.
There's a group I'm connected to in, it comes out of England. They do something with slugs and they said they can hear them popping at night.
At in Canada, I believe in Canada also, and in England, there is a slug bait, a slug pesticide, a molluscicide, because they're both mollusks, that appears to work better than ours, than most of the things that we have here, but it hasn't been approved for use in the US. And it's been a long time. I think it might be because it's a little bit too easy to get a hold of. And sometimes these things are not worth licensing. They're not worth paying the money to develop it further.
They can hear them popping.
I don't know about the hear them popping. I just know that there is something. Let's move on. Let's move on because there isn't
Okay.
anything we can do except to see if we can cut down the numbers of them now that they've grown. And it is amazing what a microclimate a garden is. We might think, oh, I'm out in the sun and the heat, but near the ground where there's moisture coming out of the ground all the time and it's being kept in by big leaves, there's lots of places for things that like wet to hide. And we'll see about some of them later. So tell people about this and tell them that on our website, all they have to do is click Fridays from the homepage and they'll find this link always there to join us at 7 o'clock. And as most of you know, to join us earlier if you have a question, because we have a little bit of a warm-up session. Okay.
Barbara's asking any idea what species of mosquitoes out there right now? I killed 2 that were a lot larger than I have seen before.
I do not know what mosquito species.
Nope.
I don't believe that we are warm enough yet for the Zika bearing mosquitoes to live here. They're worried that might happen as the climate warms. But I don't believe that we've heard that they are here yet. So, but which species of mosquito? That's like which species of beetle is that? There are more species of beetle than of every other living thing in the world combined. I mean, there's a lot of specialized insects out there, and these that suck blood from mammals and carry different things. There's a bunch of them too. The cup plant is so glorious, Steve. You make it look even more glorious with your pictures. And if Stacy is here, we finally got the rain chain moved to where we can see it. We had it over at our folly where the rain falls off the roof, but there's no window over there. We couldn't see it. And I realized, well, we're not using the kids' teepee anymore that we made for them. Why don't we see if we can hang it from there? We tried to hang it over our pond. It's too heavy for support there. Okay, so no questions, Steve?
Not, Elizabeth said she read that there were 13 species of mosquito in Michigan.
I believe it, but there's a lot more as you get into it.
And what was the name of the plant in the first questions photo?
I don't know if that was this one. This is cup plant, which is an enormous 8 to 10 foot native sunflower relative that is called cup plant because those leaves join each other at the stem and make a little cup where water sits after the rain. And you can sometimes see goldfinches and other birds getting a drink there. Not so much in our yard. This is Bell's. I think that was probably the first one.
Yep.
Other than there were some crown vetch picture way back in the beginning. Now we have Lady's Mantle and Mary Bell's uvularia on the left and full-size Lady's Mantle on the right. Okay. Let's go.
Nothing?
On. Yeah, let's go.
Nothing
on.
then.
Okay, so we're just going to go to number 1 first. We're going to say moles appear to be a problem, and I certainly have seen the same thing. If you were to search for moles on and mole trap, because it is the single most effective way to deal with moles, you'll find that we've written about this quite a bit, and we've interviewed some mole trapping specialists who work for animal control companies and trap moles. There isn't any way to say that any way to avoid the fact to say that they kill moles. And there are lots of things that people suggest putting growing plants like euphorbias around the edge of your garden because moles don't like to dig through those. Putting gum into the holes because they chew it and die of constipation. putting mold baits in. Some people want to put water in and try to drown them out, or put gas in and try to gas them out, but it pays to know a little bit about moles, and that's why we've written about them before. Is that, and so this one, for instance, when you do mole trap and then you click on the finds, this one takes you to what is a magazine version of our newsletter. So there's probably 15, 16 pages in here. You download the PDF if you're looking for, where's moles? They're giving the cold shoulder to moles. Pages 3 to 5 has an article on it here in this one. And you'd get the first page, and then you'd get an article about moles with varying numbers of pictures. The thing that's important to know about moles is that one mole, a single mole, can cover, and usually does cover, anywhere from a half to a whole acre of land. And they're not very social creatures, except during mating season, which is real early spring, late winter. You don't find moles together, and then you find them together for a while as the young are still with the mother who stays with them. But one mole, and they can tunnel as fast as you can walk. I've actually walked next to one. You can see them tunneling. You can see the earth bubbling up and see them going. So they can do a lot of damage, especially if it's a mild winter like it just was, where the ground doesn't freeze deep. It means that they keep tunneling through the winter rather than going deeper and tunneling. They keep tunneling at the surface, so you get more tunnels. And if you have a lot of them, to where in this case, I think it was Terry, wrote to say that she just had so many moles that she can't even walk safely out in the garden. In that case, trapping one mole or maybe 2 moles is all you have to do. And doing that is, you've probably read about it, you find the track, you find the new mound of dirt, or the trap, the place where a mound, a place where a tunnel has appeared, because you see the mounded up dirt. And if you walk that down and you come back the next day and it's mounded up again, that's a good place to place a trap, because it's one that's reused, a tunnel that's reused. You can put a trap into any tunnel, but you want to try to get it into a place where it makes sense. What you do is you dig down to the tunnel, which is usually only a few inches down. I just take a spade and I cut the tunnel on 2 sides of where the raised dirt is going through. I cut on one side and cut on the other side, and cut back and forth. So I've lifted out a square of sod, lift it out, clear out the tunnel, put your trap down in there. It's either a harpoon trap, and you pull up, and well, anyway, you put the trap in there. You'll see that on your trap, and put some soil on either side of it, so that the moles, which are very fastidious about keeping a tunnel clear, will come through, clear the soil, trigger the trap, and get themselves harpooned or irritated in different kinds of traps. And you can get rid of your mole problem by trapping just a couple of them. It's worse too if you're near water or near woods. Some people say, well, I have to keep them out of my garden. They don't eat plants. They eat worms, grubs, insects of all kinds. But they can dig under and dry out the roots of plants. So for instance, where our niece needed to keep moles and gophers out of her garden, she put what do they call that kind of mesh, Steve? Hardware.
Hardware cloth.
Right, small holes, mesh down into a trench around the garden about 12 inches, and flip the top over a little bit so that the moles can't dig right outside the fence and are going to be deterred from digging through the fence to get into the garden. That's a lot of work. And there is the problem that the in-ground edging works. In-ground edging might stop tree roots too. So it's not an easy thing to figure out, but it is something that once you figure it out, you can trap 1 or 2 moles and you'll be done with them for the year. It's another magazine type article that opens up, and when it opens up, you find mulling over moles on page 9. And people saying that, well, I've found that I've heard if I treat the grubs, I'll get rid of the moles. They don't eat just grubs. And it's not likely that you're actually going to be able to kill all the grubs in the soil in the springtime, because the grubs are old in the spring. They are old and nearly mature. They're nearly turning into beetles of whatever kind they are. And it's really hard to kill them. Anything you put into the soil that was powerful enough to spread out and kill all your grubs would be something that I would say stay the heck away from. We are all living things. We all have nervous systems. Well, not quite all of us. The plants aren't near sure about. There's a mole trap that I set at a client's garden that worked for us. I hate to kill things, but It was like in the case that we just heard about this week, impossible to walk in that garden. So lots about moles, and you just click when you do a search, you put in the search for, you put mole trap, and you'll find all of these different articles. Questions coming in, Steve?
Well, Bonnie had a cat that cleared the neighborhood and
Who had a cat that took the name?
Bonnie did. Gordy.
Our cats never would touch moles because they have a scent gland that smells really bad.
Yeah.
So they might.
Moles, voles, he
Might
took
catch
them
them
all out.
What are the advantages of moles? Great advantages of moles. I love it, Diane. I love it, Diane. Moles mix the soil. They, especially the star-nosed mole, which digs deeper than the eastern mole, brings up soil and the nutrients that were being leached out of the soil. They bring it up into the ground. They give you a mound, you just scatter it around. You've just got riches from down below the ground. They also eat a lot of grubs. If you've got a big grub problem, moles can help take care of that for you. I mean, everything's got a place in the world, and moles are just one of those cogs in a very, very intricate wheel. So there's probably a lot of other things that they do. They also, I know their tunnels provide places for shrews to run around, and shrews who don't do a lot of digging on their own, use others' tunnels for the most part, are voracious eaters. Shrews have to eat constantly because their metabolism rate is so high, and they eat worms, they eat insects, they think they can get a hold of. One tried to eat my hand. I was clearing out underneath a plant in the springtime, and had my hand under there, and when I pulled my hand out, attached to the end of the glove was a shrew. As big as my hand is compared to a shrew, it was going to take me on too. So there are lots of things that if you look into it, what do they call those, environmental impact study, you would not want to take moles out of the system. We didn't have worms, very many worms native in this part of the continent. We lost most of those during the glaciated times. But what we did have are moles, and they turn the soil, which is what earthworms do too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And Karen had a horror story about a service that came out to do a cleanup at one of her clients, and they cut a green leaf Japanese maple pretty badly.
Oh, how sad. Oh, how sad. How sad for everybody involved, because you know that they wouldn't have done it if they'd known what it was. And how sad for the people that are not being trained well enough to have some idea what a Japanese maple
Yeah,
is.
especially if it's a service. You know, if you're providing a service, you should have the know-with-all how to prune certain plants, or just don't touch them. Those are off limits.
We have a comparable horror story, Karen. I planted a garden one spring for a client, and she didn't need any help. She said taking care of it. So it was fall before I went back to see how things had done. And I walked up to the house, and all these beds that we had were all bare. And I put in, I think we put in 75, 80 perennials. So I knocked on the door. I said, Phyllis, what's with the garden? She said, doesn't it look nice? I said, well, no, the plants are gone. She said, well, the service just cleaned it up for me. They had pulled all of those perennials, not knowing that they were perennials, and thrown them out, and it was too late. It was already, they were gone, and all of those plants gone. And to me, losing a perennial, as we have in a couple of cases this year from various accidents, losing a perennial after it's been in a year or so is more than just the cost of the perennial. It's that whole year of growth, because they were going to come up bigger and better and richer, and well.
Oh, yeah. Especially if you saw pictures of those plants in the question
Oh,
2 years ago, how big they've gotten in 2 years, you would understand too. And trees do that.
That filipendula, the fern-like looking thing, we think it looks kind of like a Boston fern. That's a Filipendula vulgaris, also known as Filipendula hexapetala. And I was building the stone wall and just took a little scrap of root and put it in there. So let me see if you like it here. And it's almost evergreen, so it's a beautiful thing to look at. And below it, the epimedium, which I think is called dragon claw, is also evergreen. And the two of them make a nice statement all through the wintertime.
Yeah. Karen asked, when do we normally prune the Japanese maple?
We've probably written more about pruning than anything else on our website.
Yeah.
More about pruning Japanese maples than anything on our website. And we established a while ago that late August, as the weather changes, and early September, before leaves start changing color, late August, early September, or a winter thaw are really your best times to prune a Japanese maple if you're trying to shape it or keep it small. If you're just taking out dead branches, or you're just trying to establish a good structure to start with, you really can do it almost any time, but be aware that if you prune them in anytime from late February into April, they're gonna bleed. Most of the maples do, they lose a lot of sap. It doesn't hurt the plant. That sap was only going to the branch that's not there. It wasn't going to be rerouted anyplace else, but it makes us feel really bad because it looks like the plant is bleeding.
Yeah, Karen says she wants her to contact the service and tell them what they did, and she should get it compensated. Yeah, she should at
Oh.
least try that.
Oh,
At least.
definitely. Sometimes though, these services are too important to us, and
Yep.
we feel like we're risking losing all the other things that they do. But registering a complaint is the least that you should do. I think that you really need to just let people know, because they'll go cut somebody else's Japanese maple.
Yeah.
This is also a Filipendula. It's a big genus. This is one that when the flower opens up, it looks like pink cotton candy.
So there's nothing else right now.
Okay, well then we'll go back to the topics list because they're not quite in order. I can't just roll through. We've been asked for some advice about vegetable gardening after we talked about vegetable gardening. People said, well, where can I look for information? Again, if you search, so I searched just for vegetable. I typed vegetable into the search field, and I got 114 different hits on that. I have found that our search, which is not as good as Google search, what can you expect? It's a private website. It's not quite as good as Google search, but it does put first the articles that have the most repetition of the word in there. So you can avoid vegetable pests, you can grow vegetables, you can just look at vegetables in general. For instance, growing vegetables is an article that explains that you can download this chart that we use, which tells us when to start things and what to do with them, and links you to other growing concerns 756 and what's coming up 29, growing concerns 42. There's another one of the other articles is about getting the soil ready in vegetable bed. That's our daughter Sonia doing their first vegetable garden in the house. That right now there's a deck on top of that. Vegetable pests with pictures. Getting Brussels sprouts ready. We have a quotes section where we have quotes from various people, either because they are very appropriate for us in the garden, or because it's somebody famous who said something about a garden. But there's a whole vegetable section in the quotes, and you can actually glean quite a bit from the quotes there.
I forgot how good Alan Centennial looked sometimes.
This is Alan Centennial Garden in the bottom corner.
This one.
It's talking about.
Both of them.
Yeah, actually, yeah, this picture is from their planting too.
Yeah.
Alan Centennial
Oh.
Garden is on the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus, and it's a delightful block in the middle of the campus. That's a garden in a historic house. It's pretty cool. Okay, and it'll also take you to audience materials where you can look and see, you can get the chart that lists all the webinars and find out which webinar that is and get your outline. So there's a whole lot of stuff about vegetables that we've got in here, and we don't have anything that we'd call a book on vegetables. But we do have things that come up, Colorado potato beetles. What ate my peppers, groundhogs in this case. Okay, so no questions? It's pretty Japanese.
Does pruning Japanese maple in August and September, Deb wants to know, also apply to large maple trees?
Yes, it does in terms of cutting them at a time when they're not going to have a sap flow after you cut them. But I would be cutting a large maple at that time of year because I was trying to keep it small. Most of the time, winter time is a good time to do the large maples because it requires a lot of equipment, a lot of machines, and you want your plants to be safely underground while they're trampling all around. As Karen pointed out, that the service not only cut the Japanese maple, they trampled all the hostas underneath. Let's go see what else we got here. Okay. Oh, we had a discussion a little bit ago about flare roots. We were digging a tree at Nancy's house to show how deep it had been planted. It was an oak tree. And people ask, well, how can you tell that on if you get a little sapling that's bare root, how do you see the flare roots? Can you see that even this little bitty tree here, this is a little basswood that Michelle Armstrong sent in. Can you see that this root is thickening where it hits what will be the trunk? And this root is thick, but these are not. Those are the flare roots developing. And this one is developing down here, a good 3 inches down. That looks like a long way down, but that will be at ground level as that tree gets bigger around. As this trunk gets bigger around, this root gets proportionately way bigger around. And this will end up right at ground level. They'll all be the flare. So they all have that. This is a little fir seedling that's just barely as tall as my trowel. And I'm gonna figure if you're that tall, I'll start digging out here, that far away. I dug out there, found the roots, kept digging further. You can see how far out these roots go. I kept digging further till I found the end of the roots, and this is all the roots of a little bitty, probably 2-year-old fir seedling, and it has thicker roots here, here, and here, thinner roots here and here. And they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're spreading out. And when you plant that, you would plant it in a 3-foot circle because they go 18 inches in both directions. Someone said to me, well, I can't dig a 3-foot circle. It's in among other plants. Well, then lay the tree out, lay the roots out, and dig trenches for each of the roots to go into so that they're all going off in their own directions.
Yep.
To do that, I loosen around the plant. I start digging until I find a root, and then I loosen with a fork and just pick up the roots. This one is a 5-year-old fir. And you can see now even better how much thicker this root is than these little ones over here. And how many flare roots it's going to have. They have 4 to 11 flare roots. They develop as they're growing. Nobody knows exactly why. They have the numbers that they do. But yes, they go a long way. It's a big circle to dig to spread those roots out, but it is well worth spreading it out. This plant, if it was in a pot, would be able to collect water when you planted it. Even if you cut the roots that were circling and straightened out what you could, it would be collecting water from probably a few inches further than the pot. If you look here now, it's got this much area. It's got hundreds of cubic inches of square inches more soil surface to absorb water and get to those roots. It's just a exponential advantage to a plant to have its roots. A young juniper that we dug up, which was doing more going down for its first few years. This one will taper off and die back, but they have what's called an anchor root or tap root. And that's about it for roots.
Judith is asking, what vegetable and floral seedlings and or seeds can go into the ground successfully now and for the rest of the month?
Boy, almost any of them warm season plants. You can put in tomatoes, peppers, beans. Cool season plants, you don't want to plant those now until we start getting into when the days start getting shorter in the beginning of July. Because if you plant some of the cool season crops now, soil is warm enough, the days are long enough that those plants will go, oh my gosh, I gotta make flower quick, and they'll bolt. But any of the warm season plants, flowers would be marigolds, impatiens, begonias, lantana, petunias. I don't even know some of the newer ones, some of the Angelonian, whatever. I haven't looked at what their germination temperature is. If the germination temperature is over 70 degrees, then that's something that you can put into the ground now. I mean, just look at the crabgrass. I just spent hours, probably 2.5 hours, digging crabgrass out from underneath one of Stephen's bird feeding stations. I looked at it 2 weeks ago and saw it had sprouted. I said, oh shoot, I better hoe that. But I didn't. And by the time I got there, those crabgrasses had established there's such a wide anchoring root. And they lay so flat to the ground that you couldn't even hoe them. I had to loosen the whole area and pull them out by hand. And the same thing happens with all the calendula bloom, germinates when it's early. That's what's calendula called? Hot marigold. And they come up every year in our garden. And they germinated quite a while ago because it was warm, but they're still germinating now. And they'll just give us a round of color all through the summer in all those bare spaces where we let them fit in. This is, I think we forgot to show people this before. So.
Yeah, Jen and I were pretty thrilled to see these this wood shavings coming out of, we hung old birch up and this had a cavity at the bottom. And somebody is going up in there and carving out because that's where the leaf, well, I'm showing it. Sorry, I was moving my mouse over the area.
Yeah, there's a cavity down here. We're waiting for this birch to age enough that chickadees will know that it's dead and start making their holes into it, because chickadees are cavity dwellers, and it's just, we want more places for chickadees to live. We just think they're just such sociable, happy birds. And the noise, we love the noise in the wintertime. So we've been waiting for almost 2 years now for these logs to get old enough for something to start working on them. And as we walked by the clematis that's growing up at the bottom, there was sawdust on the leaves, and we went, aha, there we go. Okay. Ann Hackett, well, you go ahead, and they're brave, wonderful little birds, the chickadees, they sure are.
Yeah.
So that's, and we had a letter from Matt, an email from Matt, who wanted to know about smothering. He said, you've talked about smothering, and we've moved into a property that's got several acres, and we have got Virginia creeper everywhere. It's the dominant ground cover everywhere. Dominant, I can see color in here where there's perennial geraniums coming up, and there's probably some other things, but the dominant extensive cover is Virginia creeper. He said, we're trying to beat some of that back. So we've tried smothering it, like for our vegetable garden, and it just keeps popping up. So we thought it's probably time to do a clarification of smothering techniques. If you have a situation like that with Virginia creeper or any other plant that's extensive in an area, view it as a colony. You're dealing with a plant that happens to spread over a lot of area. If I want to smother the area that is the garden in here, I have to not only smother it to keep the plants in that particular place from being able to photosynthesize, but I have to cut them off from the rest of the colony, because these plants out here in the sun are transferring starch along their roots to the rest of the colony under here and keeping them alive. So if we're in the midst of an area, and that includes grass is a colony, we'll trench around the beds first. And we've shown you that I do this. I trench around the bed. I flip what I've cut out in that trench. I flip it upside down and put it into the area that I'm smothering, then put my newspaper or cardboard or whatever I'm using on top. And there need to be no gaps. Plants can feel that warmth, and they will, the shoot will grow. Boy, plants can feel a lot. I've been working, I finished reading a book called Light Eaters that someone out there, I'm pretty sure someone who we would know this way, bought me a copy of. I had ordered it and 2 came. It's called Light Eaters, not as in eating light, but eating sunlight eaters. And it's about plants and what we're beginning to understand now that research has been opened up into the field, what we understand about what they feel, what they sense. I'll tell you about it at another time, because I'm compiling my notes so that I can give you the gist of what's in there. But the point is that plants are pretty smart. We're not allowed to call them intelligent, we're not allowed to call them conscious, but if there is a warmer place because sun is getting through, it'll warm the soil there, the shoot will grow to there, and it'll find that space. So we overlap like shingles. When we're putting our paper down, we half overlap. Five sections, 5 pieces, layers of paper on top of 5 layers of paper, and we keep overlapping like that. So just a clarification for smothering, so that you won't have things popping up, and that you can actually clear out an area and gradually push it back further. It is a native ground cover, Virginia creeper, so it has a right to be there. We just think we have rights to grow more kinds of things, so we have to take it on. Do I see you acquiring things there, Stephen? Okay. Recurring misconceptions about sunlight is another thing that came up this week. People said, but it's really bright there. Well, the point about sunlight is that hours count, and plants can count hours. So Diane, we have a lot of Dianes, so a different Diane, was working on her bamboo. She's out in Oregon, where more bamboos can grow than we can grow here. And she has bamboo at her entrance place. She said, it started out like you see on the right, and I thinned it out because there were skinny little stems that were falling over. I've just got the sturdy ones in there now. She said, but how can I get it to get more beefed up? I said, well, tell me how much sunlight there is there. And she said, oh, it's real sunny. I said, I don't think so. Not if you've got an entrance like that. She's in a condo and next door to a, or townhouse, next door to one set the same way that, so there's a wall on both sides. I said, take a look at it through the day. Tell me how many hours that those bamboo stems cast a shadow. And as it goes through the day, the sun is out there on the street, on the driveway. And for a brief time at night, about 2 hours, it comes in low on the plants. But unless they get 6 hours, 6 full hours, maybe it's 2 in the morning, 2 in the middle of the day, 2 at the end of the day, but unless they get those 6 hours of sun, the plants are not going to grow like they're in the sun. Now the top parts are filled out because the top part is above the roof and in the sun. But if you don't have the hours of sun, you're just not going to have the plants responding like they do to full sun. Anything we should look at, Steve, before we go on with what we've been hearing?
Nope. Nope.
Okay.
Not that unless I've missed something, and I don't think I have today
All
so
right.
far.
We have a problem that Penny sent in. That the answer to it was, well, humorously enough, a quote from one of the Sherlock Holmes stories. Once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. Because we got this picture from Penny. She said, my climbing hydrangeas, something is going on. Look at it, it's all died back. What is there a disease? Is there something that could happen? So we did some back and forth correspondence, and there appear to be no injuries to the stem. The stem is not being girdled, going through anything lower on the post. And we asked for, we haven't gotten yet, pictures closer up of this damaged part. And what we got was we call it a detail, cropped in piece of the original, but that doesn't give us a lot of detail to look at. It is important to try to take, even if they're not beautifully composed pictures, to take detail so we can see it. We've told Penny that this looks to us like herbicide damage. If all of the other things are ruled out, if there's no damage to the trunk, if there's been no physical damage to the roots, if there's been no machinery running next to it, that the exhaust fumes could have killed off some of it. If it left it with leaves that are distorted like this and dead growth, it looks like herbicide damage.
Yeah, we saw the pail on one of the, to the right-hand side of the dead. See the pale leaves at the bottom.
And the pale leaves outside
Up
the
top.
that area.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty big.
Yeah, and it looks to us like it came this way. Now, the gardener says, no, it can't be. There's nobody around for acres. But that's a wooded section behind you. Did somebody aerial spray something? Could something have grown in? But as much as it is terrible to think about this happening, there are a lot of pesticides, herbicides as a pesticide running around in our environment, and it looks like that's what happened here, which is really too bad. All you can do is wait.
That again is just a guess by not visiting the actual site too,
Right.
Which is
Yeah. Okay.
Karen said yes. I missed a question. Ant mounds all over the vegetable garden. Will they affect growing on the vegetables or start eating my tomatoes when they grow? They may keep aphids off.
Or they may bring aphids out. Some insects, some ants farm aphids, like we farm cows. They put them on the plants, they milk them for the extra honeydew that they produce as they're sucking sap out, because an insect sucks out a lot of sap. Like you're making maple syrup, you have to tap a lot of syrup to boil it down to get the good stuff out of it. So the aphid is doing that and releasing a lot of excess, and the ants come to get that. And at the end of the year, they'll take some aphids down and keep them nice and warm over the wintertime and bring them back out again. Other ants are doing nothing except, like on the peonies, coming up and visiting the peony scales as they open up the calyx around the flower. There's some milky substance there that they like to come and eat. But can they do things? Yeah, they're big modifiers of the environment too. We have a lot of ants, and basically we have ants throughout the entire property. I don't think there's any place that I can dig that I don't, within a few feet of where I'm digging, disturb ants that come roiling up out of the ground. Sandy soil, good place for them to live. Where the ants put their egg chambers, where they're raising their young, they will modify the soil on the roof in order to make it waterproof so that the larvae don't get wet. And that can block water transport up and down. You can get seriously dry areas in some places where you've got ants. If it happens that you see plants wilting in one part of the garden and not in the other, you can do something mean, like getting, what were those called, Steve? Water probes? There's
Yeah,
a thing you can buy to inject water deep into the soil.
yeah, they sell them as little tree fertilizers,
Okay,
remember
attach
right?
it to the end of a hose. It's got a long spike on it. You stick the spike in the ground, trigger the hose, and it pushes water down in. One of my clients had one, and I thought, what in the heck are you using that for? There's no reason to water deep, just water the top. It gets to most of the roots that way. He said,
It
no.
def-
He said, I use it to settle the soil after I plant. I said, oh, that's a good thing. I've also used it to kill out some ants that were giving me problems. So, well, if I flood that chamber and we've tried it, when you put the thing in, you can hear the crunch as it goes through a harder layer down below, a crystallized layer. And if you fill that with water, it'll make the ants move to someplace else. No guarantee that they're going to move to someplace better, but can move it from where they are and save the plant that's wilting at the time. So yeah, they can modify things. There are,
Yeah,
yeah,
we had that happen with the Artemisia up at MSU when we were caring for perennials.
right. So there's actually an incidence in there in that. There are some ants that will protect plants. I don't know how many of those are native in our area, but I've read about them that researchers have studied the behavior of certain ants in tropical and subtropical areas and found that the ants will actually protect a plant from some predatory caterpillars, etc., because they're using that plant. Thank you very much. But I don't know how many of those are out here. I've certainly had ants threaten me. It's one of the reasons I do not wear shorts while I'm gardening. You can get bit pretty badly if they come swarming up your leg.
It didn't take me, well, having my previous work experience, I rarely wore shorts anyway. But I tried a couple of times out in the garden. That just does not work.
Yeah. I think one thing that ants are good for is that when I see ants climbing up and down on a plant, I look for what they're doing. They quite often signal to us that there are aphids up on the plant.
Mhm.
I'm gonna take a hose and forceful water and knock the aphids off. It'll take the ants away, but if they're collecting from somewhere, I want to know what they're collecting and whether they're doing any as a service or not. Okay, we'll move on here.
Yeah. Karen's wondering, when it's unbearably hot outside, like it's supposed to be this week coming up, should irrigation systems that are only on every other day be run more?
And that depends entirely on the type of soil,
Yep, and depends on the garden,
wind exposure in
the
the
type
plant.
of garden.
Yeah.
Our garden is set up so we shouldn't have to water anything but our first year plants.
Right, because we've been choosing species that can handle growing in sandy areas like this, and we help them get established to have that wider root system so they can draw in water, and they do well. But we need to, for every one of our clients, we had to establish a watering system, a watering schedule. So you water the ground well, generally putting an inch of water on, and to do that, you put out a tuna can or a cat food can, an empty one. Put it out at the far reach of your sprinkler, whether it's the irrigation sprinkler or whether it's one that you move around, and let the water run until you've got an inch of water in that can. And then, I've put down an inch of water. That should wet the soil 3 to 4 inches deep. Some soils, the water is going to be released more quickly from that 3 to 4 inch depth. It's going to fall down through the soil more. Some places the plants are going to take it up more, but you need to come back in a day and 2 days and feel the soil an inch or so down and see if it's still cool and moist there to figure out when do I need to water again. And you might have to have, we certainly have had beds that need water a lot because of the kinds of plants that are in them, and beds that don't need so much water. If you've got a bed full of hibiscus and filipendula, you're going to want to keep a lot of water on it. Whereas when you've got some of the ornamental grasses, they are just fine with the water that comes from the storms.
Yep.
I'm going to, well, no.
That's it so far.
Okay, I'm going to tell you about pines. We've been meaning to tell you about this for a few weeks, and there are some solutions that take a long time to develop, and then the problem ends not by us fixing the problem, but realizing that we don't have to do anything about it. This year, I was walking out to water some new plants. And I looked at this little pine. This is a native red pine that came up in the garden, and I've been letting it come up because I'm going to move it back to replace one of the red pines that is failing in our yard. And I walked by and went, "What the heck happened to you? All of your old needles are gone. All you've got is the new needles being developed this year up here." I said, "Oh my gosh, I didn't notice anything was happening to you. New needles are fine." Okay. And you're right under near the big mugo pine in our yard. Let me go see if it's got, well, looks like it's okay. It has last year's needles as well as what's coming up. And I was checking it because we know that there are sawflies. They look like caterpillars, but they mature into wasp relatives called sawflies. They're not stinging. They don't sting us. But some of the branches of the mugo pine had been eaten back. I said, okay. All right, they chomped off every needle. Every two needle cluster was bitten off. These are sawflies. They look like caterpillars, but we know they're not caterpillars because they have more sets of prolegs than they should have. You count these guys along the side here. Some of them are real. See the little hooks? 6 real legs, and then a bunch of prolegs. If they have more than 6, make it 6 is the number, more than 6 sets of prolegs, they're not a caterpillar, they're a sawfly. And these guys are laid as eggs on the needles in the fall. You can even see them eggs on them when you get to knowing what to look for. They hatch out and they begin eating the needles. They're the creepy crawly kind of insects that when you look at them, they'll all shift. They'll all look the other way in unison, which is kind of a creepy reaction. Well, on the one needle that was left on that little red pine, I found the shed skin of a sawfly. I said, okay, all right. So you had a sawfly bothering you. Now, is it going to bother the big pine? This is the big pine behind us. Probably not. Losing a few needles to sawflies, even this invasive sawfly, this is a exotic juniper, belongs in Europe, and it's able to handle it. It's 50 years old plus. Now, I did have something going on. I looked, I said, well, what else is going on here? And then I realized that this is the frass excrement from the caterpillar, the sawflies that were eating above this branch, getting caught in the webbing of something down below. I said, well, what's that webbing? I don't know what that webbing is. I better find that out. So we get out the books and you find out there's a lot of sawflies that eat pines, a lot of sawflies. And some of them come early, some come late, some are native. We have a red-headed sawfly that is native, black-headed, brown-headed sawfly that's not native. And they each have preferences for which kinds of pines they like to eat. This is what one of the adults looks like, and they're quite tiny. See, they look like a wasp. Yeah, it's because they're related to wasps, but they don't bite us. They don't bite any animals. They just bite pines. Well, looking for something that was webs, I said, okay, I know about all of those sawflies. Red-headed sawfly, European sawfly, white pine sawfly, pinyon pine sawfly, you name it. I was looking for webbing. I said, what could it be? Could it be a pine webworm? And then you look through which ends up being a moth. I said, okay, I'm going to figure this out for the pine. But meanwhile, what about our white pines that are so important across the yard? The little red pine that got attacked is over here. But in here, there are 5 dwarf white pines that we expect to become a curvilinear hedge out here shaped like a caterpillar. And they're important to us. We planted them as little tiny things, and they're now big enough, they're up past my knees and quite wide. So we went over and looked at them last year because it reminded us this year, the sawflies reminded us, oh, last year we looked at them and they had some aphids or adelgids on them, little white sucking insects. So I told Steve, go out and look, tell me how they look. There's number 1, number 2, those look okay. Number 3 looks okay. Number 4 looks okay. Show me that closer, Steve. And I look a little closer and find that there's webbing there. And in some places, see the white at the base of the needle? I said, I think those are young adelgids, little sucking insects. So since a few weeks ago, I have been going out every couple of days and shooting a hard stream of water. I've been rinsing off the pines that are out there, knocking any off. Not any, probably there are some that are going to make it. This is woolly pine adelgid. And the problem is that these can then move from the needles as they get bigger onto the bark and become pine bark adelgid. And you have branches that look like this in a tree that is seriously weakened by that much of an infestation. I said, we want to keep this infestation down. We don't want to keep a lot of these things here. And there are
Yeah.
other things.
We won't be able to eradicate. That's just not feasible.
And we don't want to eradicate.
Never,
If you eradicate something, well, okay, it's not possible to eradicate.
not
but
never.
Tried to eradicate, you would then have nothing for the predators of that species to live on. And if you don't have any predators of the species in the area, when you next get the next incursion of that insect, there'll be no bank of predators there that would go whoo and start having more babies because there's more things to eat. So you want to keep a balance. So looking up in the Christmas Tree Pest Manual, which is one of the USDA's information booklets, and also a forestry booklet, I looked for white pine bark adelgid. I said, boy, that looks terrible. I don't want to see it killing our trees. And in the Forestry Service, which is a great book, because I can look for host plants. So I can look up apple. Say that these are the pests that get onto apple foliage. Oops. And red pine, here's the pests that get onto their foliage. Here's what gets onto their bark, wood, and twigs. And I can look up and read about each of those things. And what I was greatly relieved to find about white bark adelgid is it's sometimes become heavily infested by the pine bark adelgid, but it's doubtful that such attacks produce permanent damage if the trees are healthy. So even if we don't knock them all off, we're giving them extra water as they're still, they're like 3 years old now, and we're going to keep them around. So sometimes, even despite the fact that we have written about sawfly for years, we've got hundreds of newsletters on there, one a week we used to do. And way back in number 90, which is several hundred weeks ago, we were writing about sawfly and when to look out for them. But we forgot because there's so many things out there. Scale insects, sawfly insects, pine sawfly in 91. Watch out, now's the time. As the wisteria blooms, that's when they generally start showing up. And if you were actually going to knock them off with water, you could get ahead of them. You don't wait until they're big. And it happens every year. It happens every year that we forget what we're supposed to be looking for. We should probably put it on the calendar. Watch out for the pine sawfly this year. It was bad last year because Sonia, our daughter, sent us this picture of her peach tree leafing out. She said, look at the peach tree. I said, remember we talked about this last year. I think that's peach leaf curl, which is a fungus that infects peaches. And it's pretty much, if you're going to have a peach, you're going to have peach leaf curl. And what you can do for it is, let me see, I know it's in here someplace, but what you can do is while the plant is dormant, before it breaks bud, you can be spraying fungicide on all of the branches to kill the spores that overwintered from the last year. Generally doesn't kill the tree, but looks terrible and cuts down the amount of fruit that it has. But both we and Sonia forgot from year 1 to year 2. I mean, in 1 year's time, we've already forgotten that we looked that one up. So we really appreciate anybody helping us with what happens next and also reminding us of things that we told them before. Margie, you may have been on the webinar that Margie told us about the horror story at her condominium association. These things you don't find out until you move in, that the association board is a little bit on the psycho side when it comes to gardeners. And they told her that they were going to call the police if she cut that bush down again. This is that bush 2 springs later that she cut to the ground. She wondered if those were berries or flower buds. Those are the berries of red twig dogwood. Birds like those a lot. And this is the plant she cut all the way down to the ground. They claimed that she killed it, and we're going to prosecute her if she did anything more. Look at it. It's all grown up. And now, because it hasn't been cut down every year for nice red twigs, it actually gets old enough wood to flower and hold berries, and she'll see birds all over it now. Carrie sent this last year, maybe the year before. She said, I've got a plant. The backyard has got a real slope. It just slopes all the way down from the house. And halfway down the slope, there's a little shelf, and it is wet there all the time. It's murder to try to mow because you get stuck in it. And what can we do with it? We gave her some suggestions of plants that she might put in there that would like being damp all the time. And even sent her some. We shared with her some of the creeping perennial forget-me-not and suggested cardinal flower and the Samachia golden coins. And that was last year. And now this year, she said, now it's holding its own. Now it's covering up. That's the creeping forget-me-not. It's cardinal flower, Lysimachia, more creeping forget-me-not, swamp buttercup. There's a flag iris down there. So if you put the right plants in the right place, it can work. She said it's not as
Yep.
wet.
And probably help dry it out some too.
Yeah, she said it's not as wet this year as last year, and it could be that the plants they're taking up a lot of water.
Yep.
But it could also be, she said that they had a leak fixed in the front yard. This is in the backyard. In the front yard,
Oh,
where the main their water supply line was leaking in the front yard. And could that have anything to do with it? I said, yeah, it sure can. The water knows gravity and knows grade. And if your backyard is lower than your front yard, the water from the front is sinking into the soil and going a certain ways. And then it'll bubble up like in an artesian spring when it runs into obstacles below ground, like packed down earth or rock. So it could be that the water from your leak in front was finding its way into the back and is not anymore, but these plants will handle regular garden soil too, so it should be okay. Ruth, when we 2 weeks ago, I said, wonderful, we found that Pennsylvania pellitory, that's this weed underneath the purple coneflowers in Ruth's garden. I was pulling out Pennsylvania pellitory, which I view as a weed, and found on one of the leaves a red admiral caterpillar and realized, oh my gosh, it's in the family. It's a good plant to have. She said, yep, we found that out down at Belle Isle when I worked in the greenhouses in Belle Isle. And we learned to leave it, that it doesn't really bother plants too much. It bothers our aesthetic sense that it's not dark dirt down there. But if it supports a caterpillar that becomes a butterfly as pretty as a red admiral, we're all for it. And then we have people who spend not everybody, but some people spend a lot of time helping us learn. And I can't be more grateful. Diane sent this, an excerpt from this book called Epic Tomatoes and a letter in response to our vegetable advice about pruning tomatoes and making sure you pinch out the suckers. In the book Epic Tomatoes, who the author shared seeds with her, and she's grown a number of his tomatoes and said it's worth doing. See where it is. She used to prune the suckers off my plants for years, following the advice of Elliot Coleman and Barbara Damrosch and Shepard Ogden and other great gardeners. But then she read this epic gardener, Epic Tomatoes, Craig LaHoulier's theories, and tried his advice, and she didn't see any reduction in productivity. And although they should be kept to one stem or two initially, then you don't have to worry about those suckers in the leaf nodes so much. She also recommends that we all like homegrown tomatoes, and there truly are some that are much better than others. And as the author pointed out to her when he shared some seeds with her, sometimes the seeds that you buy through regular growers are not what they say they are. They've been someplace along the way corrupted. So buying from a place like Seed Savers Exchange and guarantee their tomatoes and saving your own seeds of particularly good tomatoes makes a big difference. I was remembering today, Diane, about how terrible store-bought tomatoes used to. I mean, they're not like homegrown tomatoes, but they no longer are like cardboard. So they're getting a little bit better even in the grocery stores, but homegrown tomatoes, they are really very, very special.
okay. 2-minute warning.
2 minutes.
Karen Harrison wonders, what do we do for an old giant juniper that keeps getting scale?
Scale on a juniper. We haven't dealt with scale on a juniper.
Nope, I don't remember.
No.
Ever.
I would say that if I had, when you have scale, which is a sucking insect, chances are that you need to have more ladybugs and more predators of the scales in the yard. And it could be that maybe somebody is spraying that area for mosquitoes and killing off the predators that would be killing the scale. So if you can look at the overall environment, you can do something. But with scale, it so weakens the plant that you can't actually prune it productively. Everything you take off of it, you're doing the same thing the scale is. You're denying the plant photosynthetic power. So I'd have to try to get rid of the scale first. Maybe just intervening for 1 year and scraping some scale off of branches, and then seeing if you can loosen the soil, let the juniper have a wider root run, anything to make it healthier, and then watch and see what it does might be what you want to do.
Okay.
Oh, I do have one that I do
I
want to,
forgot. No, Janet,
I know we only have 2 minutes, but I promised to
and there's, oh, okay.
I promised Sonia, who came on for that I would make sure that I showed this and talked to people about it. She said her cucumber seedlings are being eaten by something and she can't find anything. I told her to go out at night because this looks like earwig damage. And she went out at night and she said it is earwigs. And she used, and this is also earwig damage. They chew the edges and the middles. They'll go all the way to the top, unlike slugs, which will start at the bottom, and snails will start at the bottom and be protected. They only work at night. You have to come out at night, and it's been a bad earwig year. There are lots of earwigs because there's been lots of moisture. This butterfly bush, it'll grow past it. I know that it'll grow past it and be fine later on in the year. But if you want to deal with it, you might use, Elizabeth had found some Sluggo Plus that she's not sure where she bought once upon a time, but it was a slug bait and she tried it and she said it seems to be that they didn't get to the plants that I put the slug bait around. So you might want to try that. Otherwise, you have to use earwig traps. And in sending that, we recognize that you need to know the pattern of the damage. This is the pattern of 4-line plant bug. It's pock marks. They also work on the top leaves, as opposed to ragged tears and cuts like the earwigs do. She also sent this picture, and if your clematis looks like this, I have the sad news to tell you, the same as Elizabeth, that this is a virus. This is mosaic virus.
Yep. By clematis.
There isn't anything you can do to cure it once the plant has it, but you want to get that plant out because sucking insects like aphids can suck on this one, and then as they suck on another plant, transmit the virus to it. Just as, and in this particular mosaic virus, I'll have to look it up to find out. You can see why they call it mosaic virus. It doesn't kill the foliage having that virus in it. It just turns it color, eventually taking out so much photosynthetic cells that the plant dies back. But this violet has it too. So it's spreading around. Take those plants out, get rid of them. These are the things that you don't put in the compost because if composting doesn't kill virus. They go into the landfills in plastic bags until we figure out some way to deal with that. So if you have something that looks like that, you don't want to have that happening to your plants, not moving through your whole garden. Viruses are tough things to deal with. Okay, Steve, sorry about that.
Have we noticed part of mildew bad this year? Is it from all the rain? I haven't noticed any in our garden.
I haven't noticed it or getting bad yet this year. There has been some in the garden. Some of the phlox leaves at the bottom of the plants that are crowded are turning yellow, which is this time of year's symptom of mildew. The white, gray, fluffy stuff like powdery mildew or the downy stuff that downy mildew produces comes later in the year when the conditions are right for the fungus to make spores. Right now, the fungus is just eating the inside of the leaf until the plant goes, okay, enough, and lets the leaf go yellow and dies. So yellowing leaves at the bottom of your monarda, of your phlox, of your cleome, annual cleomes, discoloration happening on the leaves of your cucumbers or squashes. That's the beginnings of mildew. And if you see those discolored leaves, take them off.
Okay. English Gardens is giving away ladybugs tomorrow, Saturday, with the purchase. And Jenny wants us to remind people that you have a Blair Memorial Library presentation on June 26th, and that looks like it.
Yep, just about 2 weeks to that presentation. We really would like to talk with more gardeners in the area. Some of them might be willing to help out with Jean and Donna in taking care of the gardens, which they're having a great deal of fun redesigning around the library. But you can just come just for the talk if you'd like to. I think we're doing something on garden pests. I'm pretty sure we are.
Okay.
Okay, so that's it. That's it. My goodness. Usually there's so many questions. I probably missed something important. And if I did, it'll be on for next week because we will be coming to you from God's country up north next week. Your wigs. Yep. Okay. Oh, I was going to have you do something fun. Well, I definitely have to save that for next week because it's time to design and you get to design with real plants now. So if you've got areas that you're looking to redesign, those are the kinds of pictures that you might want to send us this week before the next Free4All Friday. So I get to say so once in a while, Steve. That's it. That's it for Free4All Friday for this week. And we'll be back next on June 21st, Is that solstice this year or is it on the, well, anyway, it's close to the longest day.
It's close enough. It'll be light out
Yeah.
up there.
And if you want to share a photo, take it high resolution if you can. Take it in a way that we'll be able to see detail. Don't let your messaging program shrink it if you can help it. But if you wanted to send a photo and a question, you can text or email us. Just do it by Thursday.
Yeah,
So-
don't wait too long this week too, because we're gonna be pretty busy too.
We have 4 kids this week.
Mhm.
Well, thank you for being here with us.
5 if we count Sonia.
I think that probably everybody here who has heard Sonia knows that she is very much our equal and above. So I won't call her one of the kids,
Yeah, missing that question makes me realize how
but she is, yeah.
how
But it's
goofy.
Father's Day weekend. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers that are out there. And
Enjoy. Thank you all. Take care. See you
Yeah.
next week.
see you in a week.
Bye-bye.